everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here today. I'm your host, Donna of Dead to Rights, the podcast, and also of Carrick Publishing. I'm here today to introduce you to Melissa Yee, author of the story, The Mob Bar Mob, and that will appear in the Spirit of 13 by the Mesdames of Mayhem, coming out fall of 2022. It's great to have Melissa here with us today, so please give her a big welcome. It's got a couple of characters, Tucker and Hope, and they find themselves in a bar. Tell us a little bit about it without too many spoilers, Melissa.
Well, maybe I'll just talk about the genesis of the story. So it's true, it stars Dr. Hope Sze and Dr. John Tucker, two of my main characters in my series. And I was partly inspired by going to Las Vegas, and they have the Mob Museum. And I enjoyed seeing it, but it's also a trippy experience to go and see the wall from the St. Valentine's Day massacre and the electric chair that they used to end some people's lives, and describing the torture that they employed and stuff. Because you don't want to glamorize violence, even if you're describing it, or I don't want to anyway. So it was just, but I still wanted to write a fun story, and I knew I wanted to write one about alcohol. So prohibition and the mob, those kind of go together. But Hope and Tucker are very modern day characters, so they're not going to time travel to the 1920s. So what's going to happen? They're going to go to a mob bar.
Yes, I was just going to say, they start out in this mob bar, mob bar. I still can't say it. Isn't that awful? I can't quite say it. But they start out there, and they start out with a reference to the prohibition almost immediately. And without spoilers, I'm sure the story is going to go down some funky paths there. Tell us about your series. What is the first book in your series that feature these characters?
Okay, I actually have it with me, but it doesn't work with the blurred screen. We'll see if I can make it work. So it's Code Blues. At least you can see the bottom of it. And in that one, Hope is just arriving in Montreal for her residency. So when you do medicine, you have to do undergraduate school, and then you have to do, at minimum, some people have to do their master's and PhD first, and then you go to medical school, and then you do your residency, which is postgraduate education, which is a minimum of, it's going to be 3 to 5 years. So it's a long course. And the thing is, you get matched anywhere around the country. You say what you want to do and where you want to go, and they rank you too, and then you just could end up anywhere in a legally binding contract. So in my case, I ended up going to Montreal. I'm an emergency doctor now. I wanted to write about a woman who was much like me, coming to Montreal for residency and just kind of blown away by what a crazy city it is. You know, I didn't realize this when I was a kid visiting Montreal, because I'm from Ottawa, but I was just like, why are the roads in such terrible shape with potholes everywhere? Why are people reversing the wrong way down one-way streets? I learned out later it's because they don't want to go around the block. They just want to, they overshot something. They just want to go back to it. But at the time, I'm like, they're turning left from the right-hand lane. Like everything is wrong. All the books in the library smell like cigarettes. Like it was like everything was a shock on top of the medicine, which was more underfunded than in Ontario.
Okay.
And people like in the waiting room.
That I didn't know. Tell us a little bit about that. Yeah.
Well, when I came on, the nurses had recently been on strike. They were back at work. And I was just like, day to day, I was like, well, the nurses have to draw blood because they don't have phlebotomists to do it. You know, when I was doing call at the Royal Victoria, and they were like, oh, or even actually at St. Mary's, they were like, okay, so you can do the electrocardiogram. And I was like, oh, the nurses, like, are you not a nurse? Like, do you not know how to do it? Like, I didn't mean it in a bad way. I just didn't know why they wouldn't do it. And she was like, well, on this floor, the residents do the electrocardiograms, or the medical students, I don't, maybe as well. And I was just like, oh, like I just didn't know why they didn't have people to do them the way that they would in an Ontario hospital.
Right.
And then at the Royal Vic, they were like, okay, so you can draw the blood. And I was never good at drawing blood because it wasn't a thing that we had to do. You know, I volunteer practice doing IVs and stuff, but it really is not a skill set that they emphasize.
Right.
You just practice at the beginning, and then other people would do it. So I'm just like, ooh, this is like a good system,
and I can tell
know?
you as a patient, drawing blood is not always a very easy thing for the practitioners. I mean, I've got these tiny, tiny little veins. My mother had the same thing, and it's just a nightmare for anybody who's less experienced. Anybody experienced will immediately come with the very small needle. I think they call it a butterfly needle. Is
A
that
butterfly
right?
needle, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But if they're not experienced, they're poking around and it's just, and they're getting flustered, you know, and I know it, especially if you're going for a test where you're not allowed to drink any water ahead of time. If you can drink water, I think that helps. But anyway,
No,
digressing.
those are all excellent points. And then you think about the like children, you know, don't understand why you're hurting them.
Mhm,
People with dementia, you know,
mhm.
like there are just so many things that can go wrong when you're doing this. It is sobering. And so subconsciously, I just thought about murder, I think, while I was there. And when
Of
I was
course you did,
graduating,
Melissa. Of course you did. And, you know,
I just
writing
started
what you
thinking
know
like it'd
and
be
having
great
this
to,
medical
oh,
background, did it make the writing process easier or harder? Because did you find you wanted to be more perfect in your detail? Did that kind of make things a
yeah, so
little
those are
harder?
good points too. I was just going to say that I wanted to write about a resident doctor who would solve murders and other crimes. So that's what I did, and it's been a lot of fun. So whether it's harder, I guess for me, I've always struggled about either putting too little or too much detail into my work.
Right.
So one of
Right.
my mentors is Christine Catherine Rush, who also writes as Chris Scott, among others, and she was like, "You're," I was eating a plate of fruit. I eat a lot, and she was like, "Your problem is you're either in the fruit or you're up in space. Like either I was giving like zero detail or I'm like giving hyper detail."
Yes.
And that was me
Yes.
struggling to control it. Like, because at first I would just give very little detail and I'd be like, well, I have these characters and I have this very fun plot and here we go. Without feeling like I needed to ground people in setting because that was it's not a big
Yes.
interest of mine. And later I realized, oh, it is important and people have no idea what's going on if they don't
Yeah.
understand setting. And they really bond on it. Like, you know, before we recorded, we were talking about Toronto and Newfoundland and stuff. If people know where they are, they feel a lot more safe
Yes, if
and
they can put their
willing to
feet
go
on the
with it.
rock, as they would say in Newfoundland. And they're
Absolutely.
going to
Yeah.
feel much more affinity for the characters and for the story and for the plot. That's very true. The thing about the detail for anybody who's new writing, I mean, you always, as a writer, encounter people who say, oh, I'm going to write a book one day. And they seem to have the notion that you can just sit down like an automaton and the story will come out. It's not true. There are all these aspects to it that you've got to, if not master, at least hone a bit. And one of them is how much detail, how much backstory, how much. And the trick is a hard one to learn, how to almost be a video camera through your own story and walk through your own day in your imagination, the way you would encounter it. You know,
Yes,
if
I
you were
wanted.
walking through a medical unit of any sort, nobody would be throwing details at you constantly. And yet there would be certain things you would know, right?
Yes, it's so true. I wanted to say a few things on that, which was, first of all, that I did learn to control my detail. So that
Mhm.
was just a part of my learning process. So people don't have to worry now that they're either in the fruit or in outer space if they read my work. And the other thing was that it was interesting. I was teaching students recently. I don't know if people know, but the Writers Union of Canada will sponsor you to go to schools. And that was one of the challenges that I gave them. I said, you know, what is your school like? I've never been inside your school. This is a
Mhm.
virtual teaching. I was like, I want you to tell me, like, what can you hear? What can you smell? What can you taste? So that I know I'm at your school and nowhere else.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Exactly.
yeah. And
And
it was actually hard for them, but I did get a better sense of their school.
it's giving just enough that the reader can fill in the blanks too. Just enough that they can see, like you don't need to describe the intricacy of the lace in the curtain. You can simply say it was a lace curtain. And each reader will see the kind of lace that they want to see. And God, I mean, we all loved Dickens and we all loved all the old masters, but this is the modern world that we're writing for now. And when people see a big block of descriptive text, they immediately run for the hills, you know. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. So you've got to leave something to their imagination too, don't you?
It's true, but I just wanted to add also for the video camera, one thing that I did learn was that it's not only visual and hearing. Like you do want to try to immerse them with smell and taste and touch. Everything you
Yes.
can't experience through TV
Yeah.
or this through the screen, because that's the magic of writing.
Exactly. Exactly. What you feel, what you taste, what you smell, what you hear. We're very audible beings as well. You know, we love the timbre of different sounds, the timbre of a voice, you know, all of these things come into play and can bring you right into the story and right into the setting. Tell us the titles of your other books. So that one is called Blues.
Yes. Okay. Well, I don't know if you want me to go through all of them. There are 9 books in that series.
Yes, yes. Tell us.
Oh, really? Okay, great. I don't even know if I have any other. No, that's a different one. So the second one is, so in Code Blues, I'll just say she finds one of the physicians is dead in the men's change room. And that's the code that she's called to on her first day. And so she's doing emergency medicine. And the second one, Notorious DOC, she's on psychiatry, and a woman comes and says, "You look exactly like my daughter. Can you help me? Somebody killed her and no one will help." And that was 8 years ago. So Hope has to figure out a cold case. Terminally ill is on the palliative care ward. And that one, I was listening to the CBC, and there was an escape artist, Dean Gunnarsson, talking about how he asked people to chain and nail himself into a coffin and lower him into the Red River in Winnipeg. And he couldn't escape. He ended up drowning, and they had to resuscitate him. He obviously survived, and I wrote to him and I was like, that is so great. Could I move your story to Montreal and make it fictional? And actually made it an Elvis impersonator who was the escape artist, and have Hope save him and figure out who would have sabotaged your stunt. And he agreed. That's being made into a play now. The fourth book is really where it turns into thrillers. So that's Stockholm Syndrome. And that was inspired by a hostage taking in Utah, where a man went on the obstetrics ward and took a woman in labor hostage along with her family and 2 nurses. And so I was like, oh, I want to see what Hope can do with this, but obviously it turns darker there. The 5th book is Human Remains, and she has PTSD, and she's in Ottawa on a research block. And that one actually is more about bioterrorism. I can't say too much about it without making spoilers, but I did meet a very nice stem cell scientist, which inspired that book. The 6th one is Death Flight. I went to the Writers Police Academy and I met Catherine Ramsland, and I read her CSI book about the cases that inspired CSI. And I was really interested in air rage, which is a phenomenon where people get so angry on airplanes. And I wanted to, and I wanted to make it kind of a closed system, where someone is dead, it has to be somebody on the plane. And what if Hope is actually one of the suspects? I thought that would be fun. And then the 7th one is Graveyard Shift. So she's at the hospital. It's all one night and everything goes wrong. Obviously, there are murders and assaults and stuff that are going on in the hospital. So I thought that was, and one of my book club members was just like, this was the book I was waiting for. I wanted her to be at the hospital. But of course, I had lost interest in the hospital. The 8th one, I was hired by a travel company it's called Scorpion Scheme. I was hired by a travel company to travel the world and write novels. And I asked so that I could also write my own novels while I was doing it. So Egypt, that was an excellent inspiration. And so Hope and Tucker go to Cairo for a medical elective, and a bomb goes off the day that they arrive. And that was inspired by my travel group were there at a bombing, not close enough to be affected, but close enough to hear and feel the reverberations. I wasn't there because I arrived later because of my son's birthday, but I thought, wow, what a great way to start off a book. Not great, but what an interesting way to start off a book. And that one was a finalist for the Killer Nashville Award, Silver Falchion Award for Best Thriller. And then the final book is the Prohibition book, and that's White Lightning.
White Lightning, yes, that's the one I've been seeing flying around lately. Very good.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad that you're
the
seeing
series.
it.
That's wonderful. Congratulations. And we're so lucky to have Melissa Yee as part of the Mesdames of Mayhem. Really honored, Melissa. It's just terrific to have you. I mean, you raised the caliber. What can I say? It's
Oh my goodness. You guys were already so successful without me. Thanks for having me.
We were already having fun, and now we just continue with even more people. It's just great. So everybody watch for Melissa Yee's story. And I'm going to say it correctly this time. The Mob Bar Bar. Is that right?
No. The Mob Bar Mob. The Mob Bar Mob. Just think about the mob coming
Bar Mob. I just cannot get that. I even have it right in front of me here. It's terrible. But anyways, everybody will remember it's the Mob Bar Mob. And it's going to show up in the Spirit of 13 by the Mesdames of Mayhem this fall. And it's a terrific story. So watch for it. Thank you very much for joining us today, Melissa. I really appreciate it. And have a great rest of your weekend.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. Same to you.
Dusty road, man alone. His vital signs go on hold, and I don't know what you've been told, but the years have turned my eyes gold. And I told you what you told me, we'd never be in the same boat for free. Yet it rides, let it rock.